Welcome to today's Christmas-themed edition of Attic Raiders Retro Reviews, where today we're taking a look at a board game based on a firm, festive family favourite. We're looking at Home Alone 2 Lost in New York action contraption game. Released in 1992 by THQ in order to coincide with the release of the movie Home Alone 2, the box itself doesn't really feature any painted or drawn artwork, but being based on a movie, it's got publicity still photographs. And aside from that, it's got this giant photograph of the actual game itself, which really is enough to at least sell me on it. And if you didn't know that this was from the early 90s, this guy's haircut tells you everything you need to know. On the back, we've just got a big old photograph of the game setup, but again, looking at that alone is going to make me want to buy it. This game was brought out by THQ, which actually stands for Toy Headquarters. THQ didn't really actually bring out very many toys though. They brought out a line of strawberry shortcake dolls, a vanilla ice doll, and a line of figures based on Fox's Peter Pan and the Pirates. But apart from that, there was really not very much else in the way of toys that THQ released. What they did do though, is they did release a lot of video games. Over the span of the company's lifetime, THQ released games from Nintendo to Super Nintendo to Game Boy, Color Game Boy, GameCube, Nintendo 64, Xbox, PlayStation, PlayStation 2, PC games, and even the Dreamcast. And all of their games were pretty much based on established properties owned by other companies like Disney or Nickelodeon. One of the games that they actually had the license for was Home Alone. Hoping to cash in on this, THQ released a couple of Home Alone board games. Now, as far as I can see, THQ only actually ever released 4 board games, all of them based on the Home Alone franchise. I have read that they released a board game based on Fox's Peter Pan and the Pirates, but I've never actually seen any evidence of that or come across the game in any of my searches. Now, I can't actually comment on any of THQ's other Home Alone games because I've not actually played them, but I have played this, and it's a bit of a doozy. Of course, the number one selling point, for me anyway, is that it's an action contraption game, and that means bright colours, funny gimmicks, and great traps. This, of course, is based on the famous Home Alone 2 movie where Kevin and his clones have to get from the airport back to his house, trying to avoid all the traps that the burglars, the wet bandits, or the sticky bandits in this movie are trying to trap him in. Of course, if it doesn't sound quite right to you, you're entirely correct. There is none of that in the movie, but that is how this game plays out. And for me, that's one of the weirdest things in this. You play as Kevin. Now, I can understand them wanting you to play as the child, as the main star, but we've got 4 Kevins, which is just a bit weird. But what's even stranger is that all of the traps are activated or set off by the Sticky Bandits, and they're trying to activate those traps to hurt Kevin, which is the complete opposite of what happens in the movie. Of course, it's Kevin who's setting off traps in order to get the burglars. So it's a bit weird. And this game has got lots of nods to things that happen in the film, different items that appear in the film, different traps that appear in the film, but none of them are really consistent or logical or tie in with what happens in the movie. It's a bit of a mishmash, and it's a bit all over the place. As far as the traps go, they're obviously inspired and linked to the traps in the movie. We've got a toilet. We've got a collapsing ladder. We've got things falling from the sky onto your head. and we've got a toolbox crashing its way down the stairs and smashing over the door. In the house artwork, we've also got a nod to the heavy pipe that Kevin crashes down onto the burglars.
Oops.
And to the blowtorch that's used in the movie. But again, all of these things look more like they've been given a list of traps without actually seeing what they do in the movie or how they're used, because they don't get used at all like they are in the movie. Let's take a closer look and see exactly what goes on in this game. The playing pieces are, of course, of Kevin McCallister, the main character in the movie, each one of them wearing a different colour of jacket in order to differentiate the different players. I can understand the company wanting to appeal to players who would want to play as the main character, but for the actual theme of this game, it does not make sense for Kevin to be the one that the traps are hurting. These definitely should have been Harry and Marv, the Sticky Bandits, so that when the traps go off and they get hurt, it's the bandits, the robbers, that actually get hit or squashed by the traps. The other thing is that these are obviously just cardboard standees. They are double-sided, which I suppose is a bonus, but being cardboard, they are very, very flimsy, and every single one of mine, unfortunately, has been bent, and basically at least one layer has snapped. And there is absolutely nothing you can do about that in cardboard pieces in a board game, short of scanning this and printing it out a new one and having a replica. There's nothing you can do to actually repair these originals. So that is one of the reasons why I love mini plastic figures. They do not break and bend like this. They are so much better quality. So that is a bit of a nuisance. The actual action contraption itself is made of plastic, but there are a number of cardboard pieces in order to add aesthetics and to theme it a bit more. Again, the problem with cardboard is that it is really flimsy and easily broken. This one here, for example, has been bent right down the middle here in half. Now I have actually repaired this slightly just with some glue stick, some Pritt stick, but one of the main problems with these is because you have got to squash the ends into the holders on the plastic contraption, these get really, really buckled. It's not very thick cardboard anyway, but these, they just get buckled and they completely splay out, and it separates all the layers of cardboard, which really, it just messes these up. Now I've actually repaired these by gluing those different layers back together with some Pritt stick, but even so, it's not particularly strong. And you can see on this one, for example, there's meant to be more cardboard here that has ripped off, in fact. The action contraption itself is obviously all the traps that Kevin is supposed to set up for the burglars, the Sticky Bandits. However, this is quite definitely not the house that he does it in. It's the right shape in order to be that house, but it doesn't look anything really like the house. This is really nice and it's looking lovely. Look, they've even got flowers on the windowsill. It's all nice and sparkly clean and looks really nice. However, in the movie, it's actually Kevin's uncle's house that he uses. And when he goes there, the house is under renovation. There is scaffolding all in front of it. There's a big kind of construction pipe down the side. It's all dark and dingy and derelict, and it just looks awful. This is not the house from the movie. Presumably, it's also not Kevin's actual house, because that is completely a different shape. That is much wider, and it doesn't look like this. So I don't know why this is like this. If we look at it on the other side, the inside, again, you can definitely see this is not the house from Home Alone 2, which is completely empty with giant holes in the floor, dust everywhere, and no soft furnishings, no furniture, nothing inside it. But this is a fully lived-in house. As mentioned, there are nods to the traps in Home Alone 2, and we've got the ice skates and the cheese pizza here, which also feature in Home Alone 2, but this is far more Home Alone 1, particularly with likes of the tacks and the glue here. So I think somebody really needs to have a proper word with the art production team in order to get this to actually match the movie a bit better. No dice in this game, so instead we have got a spinner. And the last piece of note is this Harry and Marv Weeble Wobble piece. This is the piece that actually activates the action contraption, and again it's just a sticker around this piece which has got a ball bearing in it in order to get it to move and to weeble wobble around. Again, this, for logic's sake, should actually have a sticker of Kevin on it, so that it's Kevin activating the traps rather than these two guys, but they really haven't gone with movie logic in this game at all. When the game's set up on the table, it looks really impressive, and they've gone for some really wacky colour choices. Actual gameplay itself is really, really simple. We just start at the start. You have to go around the board, all the way round the outside, and get to the finish in order to win. To do that, you spin the spinner and you go the number of spaces that it tells you to go. If you land on a space which has a picture of Harry and Marv on it, then you activate the action contraption, but only if there is another player on one of the red X spaces. If you land on a Harry and Marv space, it's up to that player how they activate the action contraption. They can either push the Harry and Marv Weeble Wobble piece forward, or they can push it backwards. It's up to them, because either way will activate different sets of traps. If your turn ends on a red X, then you are in danger of being hit by a trap, but only if somebody else lands on a Harry and Marv square in order to activate that trap. You won't always be knocked down by it. The door trap, for example, sometimes will be activated by the toolbox crashing down the stairs and knocking over the door, but other times the Harry and Marv piece will roll down the chute and block the door so that you are safe. If you do get knocked over by the door, you've got to go back to the start again. If your turn ends on a red X underneath a marble pipe drop, then you might get knocked down by that marble, but you might not. Depending on which one of these red X's you're on, it might miss you altogether and you'll be safe. If your turn ends on one of these three red X's, if somebody else lands on a Harry and Marv space, you're pretty much guaranteed to get knocked over on this trap. If you do, then you need to go back to the green space. It's the same with this toilet trap over here. If you land on one of these and it does happen to get activated, you are going to end up getting knocked off unless it messes up. In order to win the game, you need to get to the finish by exact count. So this player here would need 2 in order to win. If they get anything higher than a 2, they are going to have to start moving around in this circle until they do get exact count to win the game. The problem with this is that they then might land on any of these 4 red X's. And again, this is where chance and probability comes in. If somebody happens to land on one of the Harry and Marv squares in order to activate the action contraption, the marble can come out of either of these chutes in order to knock you down. So it's not guaranteed that you'll get knocked down if you're on one of these red X squares, but you've got a 50-50 chance. Or at least that's how it should be. When I've actually been testing it though, I have found that 9 times out of 10 it comes out of the same tube. And if you get knocked over by a marble, you've got to go back to this green starting space here. Of course, being a game where the whole point of it, the whole fun of the game is setting off the traps, it can be a little difficult to actually get to that point. You need to have landed on one of the red X's and somebody needs to have landed on one of the activation spots. In a 4-player game, that's not too bad, but this is a 2 to 4 player game, and if you've only got 2 players, then the chances of you being on a trap while somebody else, the only other player, lands on a Harry and Marv spot goes down significantly, and those traps are not activated as much, and that really does hurt this game. As with any game featuring an action contraption, where one thing sets off another that sets off another, it's inevitably not going to work sometimes. And invariably in this game, that's down to the Marv and Harry jelly bean piece, which sometimes falls off the board completely when it shouldn't, and other times doesn't roll down the chute. This is, however, really all part of the game, because you don't, I suppose, want to set off the traps and know 100% that they're always going to work, because then I suppose you might as well just move the player back automatically if they land on one of the trap spaces anyway. This way, there's at least some variance as to whether or not the trap's going to work and they're going to get affected by it. For me though, I love this kind of thing. These kind of mousetrap, Rube Goldberg type of games, they are just great. I love the ingenuity and the thought that go into them. So for me, even though it doesn't quite work, even though there's a lot of flaws, when it does work, it's great. And I actually really like this, particularly from an engineering point of view. And it's just so bright and colourful and so very 90s. This is one that's not very easy to find, although actually in the UK it seems to sell a lot more readily. In the US it's not as easy to find this at all, but in the UK there are quite a few of these that have sold over the past 6 months. Generally you're looking at about £20, £25 for one of these games plus postage, but depends. If you're a movie fan, if you're a fan of gimmicks and these kinds of contraption games, it's definitely one to try and look out and to see if you can get it at an affordable price. I'm really glad I've got this game and it's a firm favourite of mine. Until next time, this is Attic Raiders Retro Reviews.